Hi, welcome. My name is Alejandra Gonzalez, and I'm here with my colleague, Deepa Agarwal. We are going to talk today about the D&E landscape globally. And I'm going to start with Latin America. I live in Chile, and my point of view is from South America. Um, do you see my presentation? Can you see my presentation, guys?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, Day Latam today, it's mainly about 3 points that I would like to talk about in general, considering also the scenario in terms of the pandemic and how this scenario affected the performance and the commitment maybe and the focus of different organizations with which I work. First of all, I would say that in general, organizations are transitioning from programs with a unique focus. Usually, organizations were used to work only in gender, only with people with disability or race or whatever. So now they are moving this to this approach of more holistic strategies. They are trying to think globally and the global benefits of work in diversity and work in equity and inclusion as a general topic. And they are doing it as a three-part commitment in terms of private, public, and NGOs, organizations together. Private organizations usually support a lot with, local governments and NGOs that are fully committed to this initiative. So I would say that's coming, that is the transition that we are seeing now more than ever in these past years, not only in Chile, where I stand, but in different organizations around the region. I work with Colombia, I work with Argentina, Uruguay, Ecuador, different countries, and most of them are doing this transition. As a second base, during and after pandemia, the focus was first to keep the jobs. I think that's kind of like the thing that many organizations around the world try to do. It was to keep people working in one way or another. That's kind of the approach most of them used. But today, I would say that they are trying to promote, and not only organizations, private organizations, but in general, the governments, to promote employability for the most affected groups, which were, for example, women. Latin America, we have a lot of half of our homes are led by women in general. So organizations are trying to increase stability, formal employment for women. Most of them were more affected than men in general because of their own family responsibilities. I would say that was the main issue in general. During the pandemic, most of the women were let go or they had to drop their jobs because they had to work, take care of the family. Now they are pushing back on that, and they are not able to go back because of those uh, responsibilities that are not shared with the other significant other partners, and that's kind of the thing that most governments and organizations are trying to fix. They are trying to promote not only that women come back in a more stable way. Most of them have informal jobs as well, so we are trying to push them in industries such as science, such as mining industry. In our case, in Latin America and Chile in particular, for example, mining industry was one of the unique industries that kept going and growing through the pandemic, and we are trying to push women there so they have the same stability that the group of men that work there. So kind of the strategies that we are using as a country and as a region are increasing the quality of the employment and promoting policies that promote conciliation and flexibility, and as well trying to make them part of the more stable and formal system in general, you know. And as a third initiative or third path that organizations are doing today in diversity, equity, and inclusion in Latin America would be the development of a more inclusive leadership. I would say that through the pandemic, one of the main learning process that many of the leadership had were related to how to understand the different backgrounds that everyone have. We were faced not only in terms of taking care of children or people around our house in under the pandemic, phenomenon, but also how different realities in terms of economical resources, the capacity of having an office in my house, or the capacity of transportation or whatever, all the things that came across through the pandemic in terms of individual reality was something that the leadership had to embrace and be accountable of all the people, and in terms of, it's not only about the job, but it's about the reality of that person. So the path that many organizations are taking is to be more committed in terms of leadership and inclusive leadership, and they are taking programs to work on the changes that they need to do to understand the reality of their different employees. So yes, I would say those are the three kind of elements that I will notice as the best and the best features that we are promoting now in the diversity, equity, and inclusion in Latin America today. So now I'm going to pass to my colleague from Relink Consulting as well, that she will talk about her region and her reality in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Sure.
Deepa.
Yes.
I'm gonna
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Alejandra. I think that was such an interesting, sharing. And I see that we're not very different, from what you've shared. And a few things that I'd like to share. But before that, let me tell you a bit about me. I live in India with an organization called Relink Consulting, and we are a research-based organization. And today, what I'm going to really share about is a bit of experiences, what I have observed, the word that Alejandra said, noticed, as changes that are taking place in the field of DEI, and especially with a bit of focus in the post-pandemic. So that's really what the sharing is going to be about. As you may know, India, we are a diverse country. Religion, the state-wise, diversity is very, very existent. And often it was considered that DEI is a given in the country and in the companies already. So not much effort was being made really, but it's only over a decade ago that organizations have intentionally started to take on diversity, equity, and inclusion for not only culture building, but also for the purposes of bringing on board increased representation of various forms of diversity. And clearly the field is evolving, it is rapidly changing. Earlier, it was all about few sectors, few industries that were taking it up very seriously, which is, your IT, the FMCG, the banking, ITES. But now there is a shift that is taking place. The manufacturing in the traditional sectors, manufacturing and engineering are also taking it up very, very seriously. So this is very encouraging, as a person who's working in the field of DI, because it shows that the intrinsic value of DI is being recognized globally with organizations. And some of these activities, while they may be started in India, they are really meant for the global setup. And sometimes, the global, offices have certain policies that we are implementing here in India. But it's interesting to note that, traditional organizations are also taking it up, and there's an agenda. Another thing it tells me is that, efforts are being made to overcome challenges that traditionally were considered to be roadblocks. For example, engineering companies where we're always hearing that CVs are not available for women, of women. So, how do we even increase the representation? So there are being efforts being made to really look at, educating women in engineering colleges, or creating certification programs. So these are some changes that are definitely taking place. So it's a holistic approach, that is being done. So one is the organization, but there is also the connect with the community. There is also the connect with educational institutions. So that's one aspect of it. And of course, there are lots and lots of nonprofits also who are taking up this activity very seriously for education and empowerment. And this can cut across, scholarship programs for women, for transgender communities, for persons with disabilities. So all of that is happening. Now, pandemic has really brought in some very, very interesting changes that I have been observing. And it's kind of increasing the field and the evolution with which it is taking place, right? One of the key things is that of redefining of traditional roles. And like you said, Alejandra, that family responsibilities were very largely with women. It's the same here. The home duties, child care, elder care, all of it stayed with women. But during the pandemic, men in India also had to equally participate. Be it something as simple as cleaning the house, or cooking, or taking care of, someone who was ill in the family. All of these were roles that men were also starting to take up. And this has had two interesting influences, in my opinion. One is that, men have started appreciating the importance of these roles at home. And they've also started recognizing that the duality and the dual responsibilities that women held for so long, and the impact it has had on their health and their, well-being. So that is one impact, right, that has happened. And so they are equally participating. This has given women more opportunities to be able to step out and apply for jobs. So talent pool seems to be also increasing. That's one. Another thing that I also observe is that these same men who are now taking care of home duties at home are going out there and working with the women. So now they're more appreciative when a woman says, I need flexibility of work. So that is another influence that I see taking place. It is slow, but definitely I see it happening. So that is very interesting. Another one that I have been observing is that of, the changing narrative. And earlier it was all about increasing representation, but now it is no longer that. It is also about sustainability in careers. So gender neutrality in language, CV masking, some of these things are also taking place, which is also very interesting. And another interesting observation that I have seen is that, during the pandemic, with mental health being such an issue, and the recognition that mental health is important, and also the recognition that as organizations we have to take on a more humane approach. So sensitivity, empathy, emotional intelligence, nurturing, caring, all of these were skills that were never attributed to leadership. But now it's being recognized that a leader needs to be able to demonstrate these sensitive and softer aspects. And because they've been historically associated with women, organizations are becoming a bit more intentional about actually increasing female representation. So I see that to be also quite interesting. And of course, there's still a long way to go in terms of, really looking at listening to the employees' daily lived experiences, conducting audits, to be able to design interventions that are relevant. So that, I think, is still a gap that needs to be fixed. And systemic, changes in terms of biases in the talent processes of hiring, especially of the hiring. So there is being concerted effort being made, but I think it needs to accelerate a bit more. And biases in the promotion and the performance, that still is a gap that we are not considering so actively. We're hiring, but unless we root out the biases in the promotion and the performance, then it is going to be a challenge for us to really take it forward, because sustainability will become a problem. So I see these are some of the things that have been happening, and it's definitely encouraging. I see that narrative is completely changed, and I think that the direction is now here. I don't see it really reversing. And it's
Yeah.
interesting, and I'll just share this data point of an organization that conducted a survey with 200 business leaders. Apparently, 81% of the business leaders have said that they see that the pandemic has impacted DEI interventions very, very drastically. And they are all recognizing the need for it and are committing to it, So, yeah, so that's my experience and sharing.
Yeah, I would say that pandemia in a way, even though in my case stopped a lot of projects, the first year, because of course they had to, were focused on employment and keeping working and everything. I would say that it's because of pandemia and the general situation with employment, with women, with everything that I would say that organizations understood the value of diversity, equity, and inclusion in a different way. It was kind of changed drastically the approach they were doing, they were taking before the pandemic, which was more like doing specific things. Now they were thinking holistically, they were understanding. We were able to give them examples of how to work conciliation, flexibility, and it was not terrible. You did it because you were forced to it. Now you can see the benefits of it if you do it well. So I would say that the pandemic in general, globally, kind of something changed in terms of the ways private world used to work. Even not only private, but from our field is where we work the closest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is so interesting. Yeah, you're right. I see it too. And, the value of it was always there. But clearly, there has been a shift. Earlier it was a should do, but now it's a must do. And, it's very interesting. You talked about the business, right? The first year when actually pandemic happened, that is the year, in fact, we saw more work coming, our way because organizations needed support. And then it was about 10 months when we were starting to go back. That's when budgets were being held because they wanted to see the business coming forth and all of that. But now I think it's actually increased. The interest shown by organizations has increased quite a bit. So that's very interesting. On the inclusivity, just one thing that also is being experienced by the leaders that is there is that while remote working has created immense amount of ability to hire, uh, historically unrepresented groups, the one thing that is still a question for a lot of leaders I see is that how can we create inclusivity for these people whom we are hiring remotely and are also working remotely? How do we really bring in that sense of belonging for them? So that is a question that I see also being asked.
Yeah, definitely. And it's something that us as a consultant, uh, it's an issue because many of the things that we need to promote during our interventions in organizations need to be very powerful. Sometimes we cannot do the same effect through the screen, and yes, we have to be able to work both of them, trying to put people together after a long time of not seeing each other, and people who were like just hired and were able to be with the organization, with the team just for 1 month and didn't know much about the culture of the organization. So yes, the sense of belonging is something that we were challenged to work with through the screen, and I think that was really interesting because we learned how to be flexible in that way, but it's also uh, it's certainly a necessity of the organizations to mix that a little bit and be able to do face-to-face things
Yeah.
and of uh, through the screen things. So it's open to different people who can move to different cities, and you need and be able to be part of the organizations, even though they change their way of living. So yes, I was wondering, Deepa, does the in India, do the organizations promote? They usually work alone, or they do work hand by hand with local governments or NGOs? How is that? The biggest programs of diversity, equity, and inclusion, how do they work in general? It's more like a private thing, or some more like a collaborative
Yeah, it
thing?
is actually a combination. Definitely there is a combination of private and community collaboration. Which is something you also mentioned, right? The three pillars. Definitely that is there. Like for example, when we look at transgender community, organizations will work with a community-based organization or a non-profit organization to look at skill building of the community, or it can be self-help women groups, to skill build, offer scholarship programs with the intent of hiring them back if they would like to join back. So that is a very, very active piece that is happening. Also, working with the communities to understand the issues, rather than taking it up from third person's
Most
viewpoint. Yeah, so that is another interesting thing, and definitely a lot of influence both ways. Both the law influencing us, the corporates, as well as the corporates influencing the law. So the maternity leave, for example, was a 3 month, which got extended because organizations are already doing a lot of work on it and had already extended and gone beyond the law. We're offering 6 months and a lot of flexibility for that first year after the baby was born, and
right.
then the law kind of got changed. So it's a combination of, all of these three things. I think we cannot say it's watertight.
Yeah, great. Yes, same here, and I think that's one of the beauty of the process, that sometimes it's the private world that pushes a little bit farther the practices in diversity, equity, and inclusion. I would say that in terms of gender and in specific here in Latin America, gender violence is something that is super, it's a big issue besides conciliation. And many governments did different studies. Colombia, Chile, for example, did general studies in terms of conciliation and how women are dedicated more to taking care of not only children but parents or other people with disabilities, for example. And I would say that they saw what organizations were doing in this area and tried to just be supportive and promote different, I don't know, policies that were temporary, but they were trying to promote and that women didn't have to leave their jobs in order uh, to take care of their families during the pandemic.
Yeah,
But also in gender violence, we had a lot of things going on around here because of the higher rate of gender violence during the pandemic. And I would say that the organizations, the biggest one and the ones with higher commitment, are the ones that are actually committing to supporting as well women that are suffering in a way this situation, because it's also something that it's will affect eventually their performance in their job. So I would say yes, it's something that organizations are seeing and pushing, and the governments are trying to support in general.
yeah,
It's a different region, but I would say that's the approach many of organizations and local governments are
yeah,
promoting as well.
yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting, because as you were saying, I was also thinking about the whole, LGBTQ issue in India, right? The reading down of the section 377 that happened after a lot of effort by the community to make it happen, by even corporates pushing for it, and then the law changed, and then it kind of became something which all organizations are taking up. So, Alejandra, I have a question. In addition to gender, what are some of the other issues that are really being talked about or is the large part of the organizational focus on gender?
Yes. Today, I would say that disability is one of the things that, in terms of subrepresented groups, if you ask me, we have a lot of work around disability. Around 6 to 7 countries in the region have a quota related to that in terms of employment. So a lot of things are going around that area in terms of training, and employment in general with people with disabilities, and also LGBTQ community. I would say in general, also we have a lot of programs, laws, and stuff that are trying to. But I would say more, not much in employment. It's more like a social thing. I would say in terms of, yeah. Um, um, Marriage, the rights of adoption, stuff like that, transitioning IDs and everything, all that around social, rights, and specifically, no, not too much around employment today. And race, I would say, is also migration. We have a lot of migration issues in general in Latin America. So it's different, but it's kind of this. We are pushed to in different countries to do a lot of justice in terms of migration law, but also employment laws and culture. Chile in particular is a country that is, even though it's tiny, we are super far away from the rest of Latin America because of our geographical conditions. So we weren't faced to migration in the ways that we've been, faced this past 8 to 10 years. Before that, we didn't have much migration or diversity in terms of cultural diversity from Latin America in general. So we are kind of, we had to do the change rapidly and be able to think openly and be able to work cultural diversity, not only in terms of indigenous groups, which is also a big thing here in Latin America, but also in terms of migration. So yes, that would say is one of the things that we are very, it's a face-to-face things that we've been working through this past years. And it depends on the country. Race is a bigger issue. For example, in Brazil, they do have a lot of policies related to race and quotas and stuff like that. Not in Chile, we are not close to it yet, even though we have to start talking about that. We are a little bit far behind all those issues. So yes, I would say those are the big kind of topics around Latin America in general: gender, LGBTQ, disability, race, and migration in general. Yeah.
Right.
In case, Deepa.
Right. Sorry?
In your case, what is it in
So yeah, gender for sure. I think gender takes the top priority, and it's also, visibly you can show the efforts. LGBTQ is another big one, and not just in India, but I see this, change of the laws taking place in other parts of Asia as well. The LGBTQ persons with disabilities. Yes, I agree with you that I also see it a lot more from a social perspective than really, than active changing of structures or policies. But it's interesting in the pandemic. I mean, and this is not to be generalizing this, but a couple of organizations that we were working with had taken on this whole changing of the infrastructure, to create accessibility. But because we were not going to offices, those particular projects were put on hold, and and we haven't been able to kind of take it to that level where it kind of takes it off. So that might have happened with many others as well. But the impact of diversity has not all been great. It has also put some of these critical projects on hold because it just didn't make sense to create accessibility if you were no longer going to the office or a hybrid work environment was going to take over. So that I found to be also interesting. And the other ones, of course, country to country it's going to differ, but religion is another one, big one. Race also. But these are things that we are not very actively talking about, because they are very, very sensitive, and at least organizations are not actively talking about these aspects. So we are yet to get there too, when it comes to us here.
Yeah, we've been faced to those conversations in different countries because of our political kind of situation as well.
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
say, in general, in Chile, we've been very exposed because of that in terms of our social issues. We were in the middle of a process of a constitution and of a new constitution, and those things were on the table most of this, during this couple of, it's not a couple of years, since 2019. But I would say Ecuador, Colombia, all of them were kind of in a, even Brazil, we had a very couple of hectic years in terms of political issues, and it definitely had something to do with the way we see social
Yeah.
diversity and inclusion, and different organizations took stand on the things that they saw, because of it as well. So I would say, yeah, it rapidly changed in a more open conversation than before. Many of the things that we didn't talk through it in the organizations before the pandemic and before the social explosion, as we talk about, as we call it,
Yeah.
weren't typical. But now we are able to talk about them in a more open kind of way. And yes, it's quite interesting to see the difference between our regions.
Yes.
Religion is not a part of the conversation in general, because Latin America is Catholic in general, so we don't have that specific conversations. We talk about other things that are more related to, I don't know, the extent of of the diversity, cultural diversity, maybe. But anyway, it's quite interesting to see that we are not
Yes.
too far away
Yes.
from
Yes.
the issues
I
that
think
are, yeah.
I also see that there's lots of similarities. I had one question. You talked about the mining industry and that
Yes.
how it kind of, actually uh, been one of the most industry that was growing during the pandemic. One of the conversations that we hear often, especially from these kind of industries, is that women are not applying for jobs,
Yeah.
in these industries. So, do you kind of experience that as being a roadblock? And if yes, then what are some things that have been done
Yeah.
to address it?
Yeah, what we've seen, for example, I work very close to the mining industry actually, and they've been working on it for a long time though, before the pandemic, and now with the pandemic, it was, I would say, it had a push for women in particular, not exclusively, but because they work with disability as well. But the focus is to increase the number of women in technical positions. So what they've done is, before, first of all, the group of the companies that are related to the mining industry do have a commitment with the government on promoting diversity and promoting gender. They have a lot of um, they have women in mining as well as an organization. They have a very different spaces of collective work in terms of gender. And in particular, with one of the companies that I work, they do have a program is a trainee program, and they do it every year, open to different, depending on the city and the mine site. They open a number of positions. So to prepare for around a year, a group of women specifically, or most of them are women, and from different ages, backgrounds, they have to apply and go through a process, and they usually have the focus of local employment. So they are moving the women locally. So
Mm,
they are trained in different maintenance or how to drive this big, trucks, from the mining
Yeah.
industry. And they are trained for 6 months or so. And during that period, we support them and their supervisors, future supervisors, in gender issues and diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. So we prepare them on having the clinical kind of eye to see if they see, I don't know, some stereotypes around the with the team they work, or any kind of discrimination, sexual harassment. We talk about different issues, so they have the tools to be prepared, not only in technical manners, but also in terms of how to be empowered in terms of gender and gender issues, considering that most of the mining industry has, in this case particular, for example, in this organization, they have a goal to achieve for next year around of 20% of women representation, which is nothing compared to plus they work in shifts, so they have to spend most of the time, like at 7 to 14 days with a huge group of men, with different practices. So we are what we are doing is to prepare not only them but also the teams in that will receive them in terms of gender, in terms of not only gender but diversity in general, and how to have a very respectful environment. And yes, I would say that's kind of the things that the organizations are doing in the mining industry. I would say that there are many other similar projects, for example, in technology industry as well. The focus is to prepare in a amount of 1 year, no longer, women from different backgrounds, and give them all the tools that they need and support, so they start showing that they can do it. And I think they've done it really well so far. We have a lot of great experiences of women doing the job that they thought they couldn't, even though they have families in the middle. So it's very interesting to see what's going on. But yeah, that's kind of the best practice that I've seen so far in terms of promoting women in this particular industry.
Yeah, it's very interesting because there's so much of learning, even for us here. So education is another one, and of course sensitization, of the leaders. And sometimes it's very interesting, that a really small fix actually changes the perspective.
Deepa, we have less than 1 minute remaining. Thank you.
Okay, so we shall say thank you. And Alejandra, was great talking to you. I think there's so much sharing that we can do, and I'd love to thank the rest of you also for joining in. And we would also love to hear from you, your experiences at some point. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you, Deepa. Thank you to the team that organized it.
Thank you. Yes, thank you to the team for organizing this.